Okay, good morning. Hey, Veronica, she's hopping on. Good morning and welcome to our masterclass this is technically week 5 since we didn't do a week 5, but it's the 6th week. So what are you going to do? And my kitchen is almost done. Oh my gosh, it's so close. Like the electrician will probably be ringing the doorbell at some point during the call, but we got our light fixtures up yesterday and it looks beautiful. So we're getting super, super excited for Thanksgiving. I stopped sending my mom pictures so it would be more of a surprise when she comes tomorrow. So that'll be
Oh,
fun. Hey, Tracy. All right. So I'm super excited. Once again, this master class has just sort of been like, what I need when I need it. And, as the wind blows, so the topics come. Gretchen had posted the TED Talk that I shared with you guys on Monday as kind of a Monday wake up. Well, I guess was that yesterday? She posted yesterday? Or was it last week? Maybe it was last. I don't remember. When was it, Veronica? Last week? Okay. Anyway, she posted it. Maybe it was over the weekend, I think.
I think it was like on Friday or Saturday.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. Well, it was kind of a thing on the director's page. And so I watched it and it was one of those TED Talks. Sometimes, they hit you over the head, like really obvious right out of the gate, and you're just like, all right, immediate nuggets, go, and you don't have to process things very much. But this one I actually, I listened to the first time and was kind of like, I don't know what I got out of that. And then, then it had to sit with me for a little while. And then I listened to it again and realized after taking 2 pages of notes the second time around that there was actually quite a bit there. And it's a little more cerebral as far as like what we discuss. But I feel like that's what this space is kind of developing into, is the opportunity to really dig into some of the more cerebral things and less, as leaders and growing in your business, really the further along you go, you kind of get the nuts and bolts stuff, and it's really more of the cerebral, emotional, and the personal growth side that really needs to be developed and as leaders. So I'm excited that that you guys were able to listen to this talk and that we can have a little bit more of a discussion this morning about what this guy was talking about. And I ordered that book, the Meaning of Life one, that Tracy said was a thumbs up, and I knew Tracy would have read it. I feel like Tracy's like our resident expert. She should be teaching this class every week. But that'll happen one of these days. And so I ordered the book. I'm super excited to read it. And it's funny because I was just having a conversation with my husband this morning about anxiety, and he was feeling all of this anxiety. He had a really rough day yesterday, and we didn't really get a chance to talk about it, but it culminated in a sad bedtime with my older son, Barrett, where he started crying about something, and it was about a book, but my husband was like, I feel like there was so much more going on. And he's like, it just really broke my heart. And I wasn't home. I was at a meeting. So we didn't really have a chance to process it until this morning. And I sent him this TED Talk after we had our conversation, because I realized that, labeling those feelings, like trying to figure out what my husband was feeling and then what my son was feeling, like teaching our children to be able to express and label just diffuses and makes things so much more able to be talked out and managed. And I loved what he said in the call, that actually when you name those emotions, it moves things up into like the more developed reasoning part of your brain. It takes it out of the reptilian part. I'm like, I have a reptilian brain, which makes so much sense, especially with 2 little boys. Maybe that's I'm very in tune with my reptilian brain. But that just labeling that emotion takes it back to the reasonable part of your brain and then helps you to manage it better. But there's a lot of good stuff. So I wanted to open it up to the biggest things that you took away first, and just kind of let this sort of free flow this morning, because I think there's a lot of good to discuss. So who would like to kick off with their big takeaway that you want to you want to start our conversation with. Just raise your hand. All right, Spring, go ahead.
I'll start. Well, first I want to say this was really encouraging because this is how I parented my child. There's a reason why I only have one kid. There are multiple reasons, but she has that temperament that's high. It's categorized as like highly sensitive, and she has two parents that are the same way. So there's no way that Steve and I could produce anything other than a kid like that. But what's been really cool, what was cool to remember, how that is what I've done with her since the time she was 1, 2, and up. I would have little basic books about feelings. And, generally the default is anger, but it's not necessarily anger. You're hungry, you're tired, you're sad, you're just whatever. But I think what's cool is connecting that as well with all the people that we're working with, our teammates, our customers. My husband and I watched this documentary on Jim Carrey and something that he did with the movie he did portraying Andy Kaufman. And it's something, I know this ties together, I promise, but he said something that has stuck with me about our business. So you know what you want, but he wanted to be a famous actor, whatever, but what do the people want? And he was like constantly asking that, woke up in the middle of the night and realized that what people want is to be free of concern. And so if that's what they want, then that's what he needs to portray and be. But I think that ties to this TED Talk as well in terms of thinking about what people need and want, the responses that we get. Because in leadership, we've talked about this, like we're dealing with all kinds of situations and circumstances, all types of different people with different personalities and different feelings. If we can not get offended in the process of, people and what they're feeling, like if I'm in touch with my feelings and how that relates, then I can help others maybe identify that as well. So I think I just really overall loved putting these things together. I've never read that book. I would really like to. But I especially think in our unique type of business, I posted this on the thread, helping people to understand. I say this to my daughter all the time, that pain with a purpose, suffering with a purpose. If you know what that purpose is, when the uncomfortable things come in our business, all of us have them. People that a new CE or a CE that's always struggled to get sales can think, Erin Woods, she's never had suffering. I know you well enough as a friend to know you do. So he talked about vulnerability, I think, and I've seen a lot of good things that when I am vulnerable in using wisdom, but vulnerable with my team, it helps them to recognize that we all have the same struggles. Mm-hmm. But I've seen, a lot of people new early in their business, even 1-2 years in your business, you're still early in building a business. So I don't think we can stress enough the concept of suffering. I mean, as a Christian, I believe there is purposeful suffering, but that's applicable to my business too. Like, why am I doing what I'm doing? And remembering that when I'm struggling to get sales, when I'm struggling to get parties, when, that's.
Well, and I think that recognizing that it is a constant, that there's always going to be, and and this is going to sound crazy to say out loud, but there's always going to be suffering. I think, in the TED Talk, you talked about it as one of the tenets of like Buddhism, but I think that it's just, and also like when we read the Josh Medcalf book, I think in Hustle, he talks about, or one of the books, maybe it was The Subtle Art.
Chop wood, carry water.
There's that idea of like problems never go away. Your happiness and ease are not like a trouble-free or problem-free life. That you always have the struggles, the suffering, the pain, the whatever. It's your management of that. It's your belief that you are equipped to handle it. And I also think that that where a lot of people that that lack in emotional intelligence suffer more is because they are not able to identify it as like, this is a thing that is happening to me. and I have some control over how I deal with it and how I react to it. And I think that's just an incredible life lesson to raise your level of emotional intelligence and understand that you have some level of control, that it doesn't, that the absence of the suffering is not what your goal is. It's actually the management, and the ability to deal with it and to understand how to, that it, and put it to kind of outside of yourself. Like, you know, me, like I like to kind of visualize. And so now that I know that this is the reptilian part of my brain, I think about like kind of my sort of primal reactions to things, like as a parent or even like as a person, like if somebody like really pisses you off or something really like annoys you, like you have that primal response, which now I know comes from my reptile brain. But then I can choose to identify that and label it, and then it takes it up a notch and then gives me, it almost empowers me to then deal with it. And I think that can bleed over into every area of your life, with your spouse, with your children, with your relationships with your friends, and then of course in your business with your customers, your hostesses, and your team. Because you can as a leader see like just a little bit ahead of where somebody's coming from. You know, when somebody comes to you with a struggle in their business, a new CE or new, you know, I don't know about you guys, but sometimes it almost like makes me smile, because it's like, oh, I know what she's going to say, or I know where she's going with this. I can identify exactly what she's experiencing. And so as a leader, you start to kind of get a little bit ahead, and you start to feel more confident in helping them then identify and, you know, not solve the problem for them, because it's not what you want to do, but you can actually help empower them by helping them to identify the struggle and how to manage it. And that's where I think that CEO, that chief emotions officer, is such a right-on thing. What about somebody else that has maybe had that experience or can relate to that, or had an aha from the talk related to that? You can just raise your hand, because I think I can see everybody. Go ahead, Tracy.
Hey, I had to switch screens really quick, because as we were talking about suffering, I realized I knew that there was a really good Tony Robbins quote, and I couldn't remember what it was, but he says that pain is part of life, suffering is a choice. And I think that's fabulous, just because, you know, we all are going to have some level of pain about something, but staying there to suffer is choice. And some of that can be wording, you know,
sure.
But the concept, I think, is fascinating. And then I might have to pop back up again, because now I've forgotten what the other thought was about the actual TED Talk.
Because you're in the middle of eating your breakfast, and
yeah, sorry. And there's a person here that needs me, but yeah, she doesn't want my help. So yeah, whatever. Sorry.
Well, but I think I think too, then that ties into what the what's his name, Chip, the guy was saying about when you're following your calling, that you have that high threshold of pain. That really, I know, Veronica, you commented about that already. Do you want to talk about that part of the talk?
Yeah, I love that quote. And I echo what you said about the first time I watched it. I was like, okay, that was fine. I'm not sure why Gretchen posted that. But the second time I was like, oh yeah, part of it probably was that the first time I listened to it, it was like 5:15 in the morning. So I probably wasn't like awake, but that quote really stood out to me when I re-listened to it. And I think about like my business, and then even my personal life and my marriage. Like, we have a really challenging marriage, and a lot of people have been like, I don't know how you guys like are still married, basically. And it's like, to me, I see the long-term purpose. Like, it's such a deeper thing, and there's so much more to it than just my marriage. And with my business, you know, like, it's a long-term vision of something so much greater than having a party right now or getting a sale today. Like, it's such a bigger, meaningful, you know, the people, when I think about our artisans, like, I just sometimes will sit there and think about like our artisans by name, to like, you know, remember why I do what I do. And yeah, you know, like I've had a bunch of parties even recently that are just like 0 sales, you know, like that Facebook party that like nobody's just all the things. And it's like, I think with that long-term vision, then it's just, okay, getting back and keep going. And yeah, it hurts and it sucks. But it's such a bigger thing. So totally love that quote. Also, the thing that stood out was just the idea of making a equation like for yourself, which was funny. I was trying to play around with that, and I thought, oh, but I thought it'd be fun, like to actually, you know, just think about like, I'm trying to think of a way to categorize, like, because I could do it kind of with my strengths, and I'm like, how do I incorporate my weaknesses into that?
Yeah. No, I think that's a really powerful exercise and for him, I think what he was saying was that there were different equations for different like times and of his life and even different days of the week almost. There's just depending on, I mean, he said that day it was the curiosity and plus meaning equals a good life or a good day. And but then, you know, obviously he had the suffering one more at the core of who he is. So I think there can be multiple equations that define us. And I think that that's a really, I want to look up the chart, like the color wheel equivalent. Robert Plutchik, I think was the guy.
Yeah, that was, I took a screenshot of it so I could look at it a little better. Cause I thought that was really interesting. Just the whole idea of kind of, cause I've seen like feeling wheels, but they haven't had the purposefulness in how they're structured. So
well, and I love to going back to the idea of the calling, like when you're living out your calling, you have a high threshold of pain. I think what's interesting about what we do with Trades of Hope is that I think, and it's true for my story as well, so I think it's probably true for a lot of people, that when you first start, like if you had asked me when I first joined as a compassionate entrepreneur, if I was living out my calling doing this business, I would have been like, no, of course not. Like this is just something that I liked and I signed up for, and it's direct sales, and you know, my calling was being a teacher. And there was a high threshold of pain when I was teaching. I get that. Like I completely understand how hard it is and the hours and the suffering and the kids that are jerks and all that, but you can deal with it all because you're living out your calling. Well, I think with Trades of Hope, when you allow it and you get to that point in the journey, when you actually make that decision and it's like the real deal, like this is now my calling, and you allow yourself to believe that, to own that, to live in that space, and not think that it's silly or weird or ridiculous to say that your Trades of Hope business is your calling. I've even excused it away before, even like on the journey to get there and say, this is my calling. I've kind of said, you know, but I know it's a direct sales company and whatever, like it's crazy to say, but maybe it's not. And now I'm to the point where I'm like, no, this is absolutely what I'm meant to do, which I think just increases your pain threshold more and more and more. And what a freeing thing to know, like I can handle it because I've made this decision within the depths of my soul and humanity and emotions to allow this to be my calling. You know, as a leader, you might not be there yet, and that's okay too. But I think that there's freedom in allowing yourself to invest in Trades of Hope as something that you are meant to do. You know, whether it's the only thing you're going to do, whether it's your full-time thing, it's, you know, you really allow it to fully define you, or it's just a big piece of you or a part of the puzzle, but you allow it to be part of your identity, then your pain threshold will go up. I believe that. And then I also can understand where he's saying, like, when other things are kind of falling apart and life, you know, and you know, like, and it wasn't just about his business, clearly it was about other factors, his son and his relationship and his friend dying and all of those things, that the anesthetics wears off and that you can't, that you start to feel the pain a little bit more. And I can relate to that too. And I think there's just so much freedom in identifying these things as, like, I'm not crazy, I'm not suffering this for no particular reason. Other people have gone through these things. It's part of the deal, but there, you know, and that there's another side to it too. does anybody relate to that thing, that idea of allowing Trades of Hope to be your calling, or maybe you're not quite there yet, or you want to talk about that? Denise? I unmuted you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I can totally relate to that. I did not come into Trades of Hope thinking this was going to be my career at all, or my calling. I'm also a former teacher, but I realized that teacher part of me is being lived out through Trades of Hope career. So that's been really surprising for me and wonderful. But one thing that really, I mean, among other things, I'm not a math person, but I loved the equation thing, and I took notes because I love that, you know, the whole despair thing, you know, suffering, being that constant, and then meaning, you know, being the variable, and how we should really focus on the variable, you know, that meaning. And so, you know, this meaning that we have in our Trades of Hope business, you know, when those hard times come, and they're going to come because we're dealing with people. So I loved the equation part of it and the whole happiness thing. And like I said, I shared this with my family because my son-in-law is a math major and is teaching math at high school. So I know that the men in my life will really, you know, love the whole emotion equation thing. But the one thing that's really sinking in for me is, and it wasn't even the takeaway that I shared on your post today, but just the whole thing about this whole midlife and the whole curiosity thing, and how, you know, when we're kids, you know, we have that wonder as children, and then we have this awe as an adult. And I'm in my 50s now. I can't believe in like 5 years I'm going to be 60, which is just so strange to me because I don't feel that old. I, you know, had been through a really rough time, like this whole past 10 years. And the fact that I really believe God brought Trades of Hope into my life. And it's something, yeah, that I really see as my calling. And I've sort of, like, the last 2 years are like probably the hardest of my life. And I've been lamenting, like, the last year, this whole thing about cheapers. Why couldn't I know what I know now and what I've learned, like, through these 2 years of suffering? Like, I wish I could have learned this in my 30s or 20s. Like, where would I be now if that were the case? You know, and I was like, instead of just being grateful where God has brought me, but it's something that I've had to lay aside. And so when I look at this, I just think, you know, that happiness scale, you know, goes downhill between 35 and 50. And so now I'm in my 50s, and so I'm experiencing that it does go uphill. Like, we're starting to get happy again. And I realize, you know, all of those things, that it's just God's timing, and that I shouldn't lament over it, that, you know what, maybe the best years are yet to come. I mean, Moses, right? God didn't use him till he was, I don't know, in his 80s or whatever. But it's so easy to focus on what we don't have. And he did talk about, you know, that equation of happiness, you know, wanting what you have, dividing that by having what you want. And, you know, instead of just being, you know, it's really a gratitude equation. So that whole happiness equation and the gratitude equation, they all sort of meld together as one for me. I love that TED Talk.
I know. It's like the more you talk about it, the more you discover. I mean, yeah, that whole thing from the Economist article about the pursuit of joy and that U shape of happiness. Like, I'm at the bottom of the U right now. And I kind of get that. Like, I'm not an unhappy person, but like when you're in, you know, when you're in the thick of, like, I feel like I'm at this huge turning point because I'm about to turn 40. And so I feel like I'm like shedding childish things, and then growing, like, but there's like a molting that's going on, you know, where I'm gonna become something different on the other side. And yeah, I feel like I'm just at the beginning of this, like, big kind of painful churn over, but in a way I'm kind of excited about it because I know it's gonna just, like, evolve into that upswing. So it was really actually comforting to see, like, the U go up, because I'm like, yeah, okay, they're like what I'm feeling is right on, and it's good. Even though it's hard, it's good. And I think I think that's amazing. And so you're like a little bit ahead of me in the U, and that gives me a lot of encouragement. You know, even though there's suffering, there's like this abundance of joy and curiosity and awe that's going to come on the other side.
And recently you said how you feel like you're growing up for the first time. Recently you said that, I don't remember what class. I sort of feel like that too, you know, keep in my 50s. Yeah. So now I'm not going to lament anymore. I'm just going to, you know, own that whole, I'm on my way up. Thank God.
Yeah. It's awesome. It's really a kind of a cool thing, and it makes aging not so bad. You know, it like makes it like, you know, I don't know. It's kind of a cool thing. Ryan shared a long thing in the chat. She said she can't really talk because she's at work, but she said, I'd add that I completely agree here. I knew that I needed something more fulfilling in my life, and I think I've gotten this from Trades of Hope, but my journey has been slow. It's taken me time to come to terms with the speed in which I was able to build my business, but the passion that I have for this work has allowed me to have more compassion for myself and more patience. I would have never been able to endure the slow times, the times when I've struggled, if it wasn't passionate. And that's 100% it, Ryan. I think that's so much about what this talk is about, is, you know, that you're living out that calling and that passion, and that's what makes the growth and the molting and the struggles feel really good ultimately on the other side. Amber said she wanted to speak. So Amber, why don't you hop in?
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. When my heart is pounding, like it's feeling like it's going to pound out of my chest, I know that God's like, hey, you need to say something. I just experienced one of what a mother would consider like her worst nightmare other than losing her child. And it ended up not being anything. And then through the whole process, and I'm not going to get into details, but at the end, it was God shared with me, Amber, this was meant for you to feel this way. This experience was meant for you, even though it was nothing, because I was angry. I was like, why go through all of this and then it be nothing? So it was meant for me. So those experiences, those suffering, you know, I know that I am walking in my calling. So the suffering has just been like, but I'm not suffering. I find that joy. I find peace in knowing that this was meant for me. But how I like kind of like work that into my business and my team and growing my team is it really helps me to relate with others, that I'm not the only one going through this time in my life. And I swear to you, every time I talk to someone who is serious about joining Trades of Hope or has a passion or a calling for this business, they're like, something serious happens in their life. And I'm like, what is going on here? So but it gives me a little bit more grace for people. I think that sometimes we get caught up, and I want to grow my business. I want to get to the top. I want to make money. I want to, you know, and then it just kind of brings us back a little bit to remembering and having grace for these people. You know, and when we talk to our potentials and even our teammates, we have to, you know, remember and really kind of genuinely get to know them and what it is that they're going through. And then how can we work Trades of Hope into their life, and help them do that. So that's not, I could sit here and talk forever. But.
Well, and he kind of talks about that, just to wrap it up. That's what he talked about in the call or in the TED Talk, that we're all humans. Like sometimes in business, we leave out that human factor, and that you get training on how to drive a car, how to use a computer, you get training on how to do the back office, but we don't have a training in the app about emotional intelligence for Trades of Hope. And maybe we should, you know, maybe as leaders, this is something we can, you know, bring up and carry forward into, I just feel like it's like maybe the missing equation and missing piece, equation. We need some equations, because it is such a powerful element in our business that's often forgotten. and kind of slept over for the nuts and bolts. So I feel like we could talk all morning about this, but the next group is coming on, and great stuff here in this call. Isn't it amazing that, I want to almost go back and rewatch it again, and oh, my electrician's here. So I'm going to stop this recording. Thank you guys for being here this morning.